You're listening to the ANEC Sports Podcast. The show starts right now. Welcome to a special edition of the ANEC Sports Podcast. My name is Sam Fred. I'm the founder and editor at Around the Northeast Corner. And as you can see, we have another state finals matchup to discuss in the Northeast Indiana area of our coverage. And Warsaw will soon be a future member full-time at ANEC Sports, as we are going to expand from 30 to 64 schools altogether, although the way in which we divide up the coverage will differentiate and vary based upon the way in which we divide up that coverage. It won't exactly be 64 schools in one conglomerate. You'll have some schools in one section of our branches, our series of coverage, and then some schools will go in another area. We'll talk more about that at another time. But right now, we have this big matchup coming up on Saturday nights featuring the 26-1 Warsaw Tigers and the 18-8 Lawrence North Wildcats. For Warsaw, they come in as the fifth-ranked team in Class 4A, according to USA Today and the AP polls, and also ranked number 5 in the coaches poll. Lawrence North, on the other hand, they're not the Cinderellas by any stretch of the imagination, because I do think Lawrence North has clearly been slept on all season long. I've seen Lawrence North play in the past, and they are way, way more competitive than I think many people give them credit for Coach Thomas's Lawrence North Wildcats, and they are not ranked in either the AP polls or the coaches polls. But again, they are hotter than a firecracker right now, winning their last 8 games. And that one of those wins includes a win over their rivals, the Lawrence Central Bears, who happen to be the defending state champions from last season. And many believe they were going to make it back to Gainbridge Fieldhouse. And then Lawrence North said, "Not so fast, my friend." Meanwhile, the Warsaw Tigers, they've had the hype, they've had the anticipation for many years now. And after many years of coming up just short in sectional play, the Warsaw Tigers win their first sectional since 2015. They win a regional championship for the first time in over a decade, and now they're in the state finals for the first time in 23 years. Are the Warsaw Tigers, who, I don't know, it happens to be the 50th anniversary of the very first state champion girls basketball team in IHSAA history, which was the 1976 Warsaw team, where Miss Indiana basketball Judy Warren led the Warsaw Tigers to a 57-52 win over Bloomfield to win the very first state championship. They would win another one 2 years later in 1978 against Jacksonville, and they have not won another one since, even though it has been a special run for the Warsaw Tigers as a school. I mean, just recently, in the fall season, the football team made it to the state finals for the first time ever. Volleyball has knocked on the door for a state finals berth for many years now, and now you see the Warsaw Tigers girls basketball team sitting one win away from championship glory. Now, let's talk about this matchup. And by the way, I said 22 years. It's actually been 21 years, because they went to state in 2004. They also went to state in 1991. Both years they came up short. Anyway, let's shift over to the head-to-head matchups statistically between these two opponents. Right now, the Warsaw Tigers have the edge in shooting percentage at 52% to Lawrence North's 45%. Three-point percentage favors Warsaw by a pretty good margin at 41%. Holy cow. To Lawrence North's 36%. Free throw percentage substantially favors Warsaw at 77% to 64%. Rebounds, however, favor Lawrence North at 31 to 29. Points per game favor Warsaw at 72 to 61. Points against per game, 39 to 49. And you round up the totals. Point differential, 33.3 for Warsaw, plus 33.3, to Lawrence North, plus 11.1. Keep in mind that Warsaw has essentially been a buzzsaw this entire year. Now, some of that can be factored into their schedule. Warsaw did not play the hardest of schedules And I know Mason was kind of critical of Warsaw's schedule because, the whole thing of Warsaw not going to Indianapolis in the regular season, yada yada yada. You be the judge on that. I'm not gonna make that comment, but obviously Warsaw, we knew for a while they had the talent to make a deep run. They just came up short in sectionals, whether it was against Elkhart or Penn or notably with Northridge. And finally this year, it seemed like for the first time the Warsaw Tigers finally got it all together at the right time. It just felt like they were due for a run at some point. You knew the pieces were there for the Warsaw Tigers to have a special team. They just needed to just get it done in sectionals. And now you see Warsaw one win away from championship glory. And as you can see with the Warsaw Tigers, when you read through their stats, whether it's through match preps or it's through the IHSAA previews, you can tell Warsaw has a really good basketball team right on paper, right? I would say it all starts with their senior, Brooke Winchester. I know she's not their leading scorer, but she really sets the tone for this Warsaw team as a senior Ball State commit for the 6-foot forward, Brooke Winchester. She's almost, honestly, Brooke is kind of almost positionless in a way because she can play the 3, she plays the 4 and 5, so she really doesn't have a set position because she does everything around the rim and in the interior for the Warsaw Tigers, averaging 12.7 points per game, 10 rebounds, 49% shooting, 38% from 3, 79% from the foul line, 2.2 assists per game. Only 3 other players had more assists than Brooke Winchester this season. And, I've done some homework, and she's had, I think, close to 20 double-doubles in the last 2 seasons for Brooke Winchester. That just tells you how incredibly talented she is, as well as her being a very selfless young lady. That's why she's going to Ball State. And then obviously you have these two really, 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 really good sharpshooting guards in Brooke Zartman and Jocelyn Bricker. Brooke Zartman, a.k.a. the Zart Dart, is averaging 18 points per game, 1.9 assists, shooting 53% from the floor, 44% from 3. That leads Warsaw. 90% from the foul line. That also leads the Warsaw Tigers, at least for players that have played more than just a couple games. And as recently as their last game against Hamilton Southeastern, Zartman had 25 points in that gritty 67-61 win over Hamilton Southeastern, the number 1 team in the state of Indiana in Class 4A and as a whole. I mean, they were essentially the only team left standing that was undefeated in 4A until, this Warsaw team showed up and broke their hearts, so to speak. And then you have Jocelyn Bricker, the daughter of Central Noble grad Ryan Bricker. So for all you Central Noble fans, they're wondering, man, that Bricker name sounds familiar. Yep, that's because she's the daughter of Ryan Bricker. Jocelyn averages 19.2 points per game to lead the Tigers, 59% shooting, 43% from 3, 82% of the foul line, 3.1 assists. That only trails Alexis Neely, and 5.4 rebounds per game. She only trails Brooke Winchester. Bricker, just a couple games ago, I believe it was against Northridge, as a matter of fact, she had 34 points, 3 points shy of the single game scoring record in the win over the Northridge Raiders, and that was a 71-54 Warsaw win. And again, with the Warsaw Tigers averaging 72 points per game, 3 of their players have scored 1,000 points in their career, and 2 of them, which are Zartman and Bricker, they are only juniors, folks. They might be etching their names even further into the history of Warsaw basketball. And it's a rich history of Warsaw basketball dating all the way back to the original years of the 1970s. Those those pioneer years of Warsaw girls basketball. And then Alexis Neely kind of gets overlooked a bit because, she's not Brooke Zartman, Jocelyn Breaker, and Brooke Winchester. But boy, is Alexis Neely such a vital piece to this team. 9.6 points, 4.5 rebounds, 3.8 assists, 75% foul shooter, 30% from three, 42% from the floor. When it comes to leadership, when it comes to that player that really just sets the tone, gets everyone around her to feel good about their game, and be able to do all the intangibles that you need for a basketball team to make a deep run. Alexis Neely is that player for the Warsaw Tigers. She's had moments this year where she would go off in crazy spurts. And that's because Neely doesn't have to be the leading scorer every night. She just has to be incredibly balanced. When I think about Alexis Neely, and other than the three-point shooting, the one thing that comes to mind with Alexis Neely, in terms of a comparison, she really reminds me of, I want to say she reminds me of Tessa Tonkel in a way. She's tough. She can shoot. She can rebound. She can defend. She can see the floor very well. She's incredibly selfless. She'll take a charge if she needs to. She'll get a steal. She'll make a basket. She'll make a play. Abby Peterson, 46% from three. She don't score a lot of points, but when she gets opportunities to make shots, she's almost on a mat. 46% from three is very, very good. And that's the thing about this Warsaw team. They have the height. They are finesse. They have the playmaking ability. They can make shots at an incredible rate. They're scoring the basketball at such will and such ease at times. It makes last year's Norwell team look silly. That's how good this Warsaw team is. And obviously, the Warsaw Tigers have built some major mental toughness over these past several years because of the experiences they went through, losing those tough games, losing those heartbreaking moments in the postseason, right? And look at, I think Lenny Krebs would say it best. Like, when you have two players foul out in Brooke Winchester and Jocelyn Bricker in a tight game in the fourth quarter in a semi-state championship game against the number one team in the state, the undefeated Hamilton Southeastern Royals, you're not thinking, yeah, we're going to beat HSC, right? Most of the time, right? 9 times out of 10, you're not winning that game. And he admits, like, hey, if you would have told me we would have two players foul out and we were going to win this game anyway against the number one team in the state, he said, look, you'd be kidding yourself. And this team is finding ways, to make plays and to win games. Yeah, they have been awesome in the regular season, scoring at a high rate against even the best of competition. They beat Norwell by 24 points. That is a really good Norwell team that just made the state. Snyder, they beat him by 29 points. Snyder went to regionals. Huntington North, solid team. Valpo, they made it to semi-states. They beat them in overtime. They took down Northwood, pretty solid team. They beat Columbia City by 15 points. They were one win away from the state finals. Northridge, solid team. Homestead played in regionals. That was their lone loss, was to Homestead. And thank God they play Homestead, because sometimes you need to lose a game to figure out who you are. And you know what? Credit to Coach Krebs and credit to this program for putting putting in a schedule that best prepares them for the state tournament. Even though it's not the, hey, we're going to Indianapolis type of thing. And you know what? I don't think anybody's going to care about it at this point. They're here. They're in the state finals. And that's all that matters. But boy, you got to feel happy for Lenny Krebs, a 1991 Fairfield grad, spent most of his coaching career in Goshen, Indiana, whether it was with Fairfield or with Goshen, and even 8 years as assistant coach for the Northwood Panthers. So he has seen plenty of experience over his time as a basketball coach. And now he's been with the Warsaw program for 8 years now, dating back to 2017. And boy, has he built quite the powerhouse since he's taken over this program in 2017. And it's a program with a lot of history, a lot of talented kids, but they got a tall task in front of them against the Lawrence North Wildcats. And again, I mentioned this earlier, but Coach Stephen Thomas's team was overlooked. And I can get it why. I can get why. Because you have this Lawrence Central team that was getting all this hype. They won their state championship last year in convincing fashion against Lake Central, and they defeated Lawrence North, although only by 1 point, 52-51. Keep in mind, Lawrence North plays a really difficult schedule. They played HSC, only lost by 10. Played Silver Creek, only lost by 8. Right? They played South Bend, Washington. They lost by 19. For most people, they would say that's a win because Washington was kind of steamrolling through the schedule for most of the season. You look at the schedule, Lawrence Central, as I mentioned earlier, they beat Warren Central by 12. Okay, as I was saying, so they beat Warren Central by 12. They beat Brownsburg by a point. Brownsburg had a great season for the Bulldogs. They beat Valpo by 31. Lost to Noblesville by 3. Lawrence Central, they lost to them again by 24. Lost Center Grove by 3, which they were seen as one of the better teams in 4A. They lost to Big Walnut, Ohio by 9. So that's an out-of-state opponent. And they beat Ben Davis Fishers of Pike to end the regular season. Obviously, they took care of Lawrence Central. They beat Pendleton Heights, Gibson Southern, and Pike. That Pike game was only a 1-point game. So Lawrence North, they're resilient. When we talked about the Lawrence North Wildcats, they're not a team with all these big fancy numbers, right? They just have a nice, athletically gifted team. They're battle tested. They're resilient. They're tough. They're very, very balanced. You look at Kaya Hurt, 13 points per game, 3.7 assists, 46% from the floor, 38% from three. She is a shooter for this Lawrence North team. Like when I talk about players that they know when they have that green light, like Kaya Hurt, she's got that shooter's touch. She is an incredible point guard for the Lawrence North Wildcats. And you got another player in I want to make sure I don't butcher this name here. So, basically call her Kiki Butler. Is that right? I'm just gonna go by the pronunciation. So it's Kiki Butler. I know it's not her full name, but Kiki Butler is her name, number 25, the 5'8" junior point guard, averaging 13.7 points, 4.7 rebounds, shooting 36% from three, 47% from the floor. Again, two really nice complementary guards. Both can play points. Both can play each other on that floor, and just really, really smart basketball players. And then you got Coach Thomas's daughter in Jemiah Thomas, who's averaging 12.3 points per game, 50% from the floor, 4.9 rebounds per game. And then you got Nasia Winston with 6.5 points, 5.5 rebounds. Very balanced teams I mentioned earlier, 30 rebounds per game. So they have the heights, they have the athleticism. I mean, we're talking 4 players that are 6 feet or taller. So the height and the size of Lawrence North is gonna be in their favor on paper. And this is a team that played Warsaw in the off season. So these two have known each other before in summer league, at least for summer games. And obviously Lawrence North beats Warsaw. Obviously you can't take too much into that, but it does tell you just how good this Lawrence North team is. This is a team that makes shots. They got some tough, resilient kids. They're incredibly athletic. So you have to wonder, the offensive rebounding for Lawrence North has to be a key against the Warsaw Tigers. They also are going to have to be able to close out to defending their threes. You cannot allow Warsaw to make their shots from distance, because they can make a bunch of shots at a high rate. So Lawrence North is going to have to contest their shooters. Obviously, they can play a high-tempo offense, and they can play that style, but I think Coach Thomas's team is going to have to be smart against Warsaw's high-level offense, and that's going to be something to keep an eye on. The turnovers are going to be key here when you're playing a team like Warsaw that can score in bunches. So being able to take care of the basketball is going to be key. I think, really, to me, when it comes to Lawrence North, the biggest key for them is going to have to be putting the trust in your guards. Because I think if they can allow both Kiki Butler and Kaya Hurt to do their magic, Lawrence North could be a dangerous basketball team. And I do think even, they're going to need some grittiness in the glass. They're going to have to be resilient. They're going to have to play hard-nosed basketball, at least in the interior. But more importantly, is they got to put their trust in their point guards, because when those two guards can do what they do best, they are incredibly special players. And again, Lawrence North's a battle-tested team. They know how to play against top-end competition. So this is not a David Goliath type of situation here. This team is very much a threat here, and I can already tell you Warsaw is already taking Lawrence North seriously. They already mentioned about how dangerous they are. So we do expect this to be a competitive basketball game in spite of Warsaw's gaudy numbers offensively, and they are fantastic numbers. But Warsaw is a team that's going to have to be able to withstand their athleticism, kind of like what we talked about with South Bend, Washington. They took care of business against South Bend, Washington. But I do think when it comes to the matchup with Lawrence North, this is a different type of athleticism that Lawrence North brings to the table. I talked about this just last week. It reminds me of last year when I talked about Norwell against Lawrence North. And let's be honest, Lawrence North this year is very, very much the same team as the one from last year. There's not that much difference. There's not that much difference from this year to last year. And this Lawrence North team was down 20 points in the first half against the Norwell Knights. They came back and they won that game basically at the buzzer by 2 points. So if you think that Warsaw is going to run over Lawrence North, I think you're sadly mistaken. I think this team is going to be right there in the thick of things, but I think for Lawrence North, it's going to come down to, number one, putting the trust in Kiki Butler and Kaya Hurt to do their magic, right? Number two, they got to be tough defensively. They got to contest their shooters. They got to block out. That's the big thing. You cannot give Warsaw easy shots because they are a team that makes them at a high rate. 51% from the floor, 41% from three, even from the foul line, 77%. You got to play good defense, and you got to be smart. For the perspective of Warsaw, right? Number one, I think the big key for Warsaw is not let the moment get too big. This team has not been in this stage in 21 years. These kids have never been in this type of environment before, right? So there's going to be some nerves. There's going to be some excitement, right? They may not start off so great offensively early on, right? But how does Warsaw respond, right? Do they let the moment get too big, or do they keep playing and keep trusting their instincts? Those are going to be key things for the Warsaw Tigers. Obviously, they're going to have to make their shots because, look, that's what's got them to this point is they've been able to score at a high rate, but also being able to showcase a sense of defensive toughness. Now, it's a different type of defense. They're a little bit more finesse, but they've shown this year that they have become a mature team on both ends of the floor. So we can't say Warsaw is a soft team now. I for one never said that, but there's people that now say, look, this Warsaw team is for real. They are not just a really talented team. And that's what makes them dangerous here. So number one, don't let the moment get too big. Number two, right? Number two for Warsaw is you gotta be able to move without the basketball, right? Well, big reason why Warsaw's been successful this year is not just their ability to score with the ball or their catch and shoot situations, but also the way they move without the basketball. You're playing against a team like Lawrence North that has the athleticism and they have the scrappy play that they are. You got to be able to move. You got to be able to get good ball movement, and you got to be able to limit the dribbling, right? Limit the dribbling, get good movement, run your offense efficiently. It sounds easy saying that now, but when you're in this big stage, every single thing you do is maximized times 10, right? So they got to be able to run their offense well. And then lastly for me for Warsaw, I think the big thing for Warsaw is they got to make sure that they are disciplined defensively. Defend without fouling, right? There's aggressive fouling, there's aggressive defense, but there's also fouling. You want to make sure that you're being careful about the fouling part. Which team can stay most disciplined defensively, I think is going to be key in this matchup. Again, I don't expect this to be a blowout. I think we're in for a good ball game between these two teams. I think it's going to come down to which team can make shots, obviously. Which team can be the most disciplined, I think, will decide this game. Thank you for watching the ANEC Sports Podcast. Please like this video and like the page ANEC Sports on YouTube. Let people know that the ANEC Sports is on YouTube. Also like our Facebook page at Around the Northeast Corner and follow either Around the Northeast Corner and Sam Frick on Twitter/X. We're also on Instagram as well. Just look for ANEC Sports or Around the Northeast Corner and you will find us there. You can also follow the man himself, Sam Frick, the founder and editor at Around the Northeast Corner, for other additional content. This has been an Around the Northeast Corner presentation.